What do you think? Would this chain play worry you? About an inch of travel back and forth. No tensioner. This drives the oil pump and the water pump. No Nonsense Know-How here, and this is going to be a supplement to my stator replacement video for the Rhino 660. So if you need help getting the cover off or to this point, consider checking that video out. I'll put it over here. In this one, I'm going to cover the replacement of the oil pump chain and also show you an alternative I came up with, maybe just adding a tensioner instead. This is your oil pump chain, and like I said, it drives the oil pump and the water pump, two of which you do not want to fail. The kicker is if the water pump fails, you would see the overheat light come on. Okay, fair enough. But if the oil pump failed, this does not have an oil pressure light, low pressure light, and it doesn't have a shutoff. So you would just be riding around with no oil pump chain, no pressure, and you'll blow your motor. I did read some stories in forums of guys getting rod knocks from this happening. These chains have broke and the oil pumps have failed on these. So this is not something that you want to overlook. Now my first thought was, why the heck didn't Yamaha put a tensioner of any sorts on this? We can see, I mean, it'd probably be alright if I left it alone, but it is starting to rub the case down here. And God forbid this thing jumps a tooth, it's going to be catastrophic failure. So I went online to see how much a new chain was, and it was only 13 bucks. Figure, okay, why not? I'll order one. There's the part number in case you want it. You also want to get a lock washer that goes on this nut here. You could reuse that one if you want to, but why not for, a couple bucks. And then you also need a puller for the flywheel. And after ordering that, I got to thinking, this is kind of just a crummy design in my opinion, since it does not have a tensioner. So then I decided to get a little crafty. I'm looking at it and I thought maybe I'll just add a tensioner to it, which I don't approve of this idea, but I'm going to show you what I came up with anyway. Behind it, there's a hole in the cases. Goes pretty deep and it's about 80% completed, as you can see. So I ran a tap through that after doing some careful measuring, and I helicoiled it with 8x125 threads. I then went into my massive junk room and went through all my drawers and came up with this. I have a bearing, a piece of brass 3/4 inch pipe, since I tried PVC, but that gets really soft around 200 degrees, a couple spacers, and a bolt. I did have to machine out the brass on the inside, and the bearings pretty much a press fit in there. You'll also notice from using a pipe cutter on this that it's kind of like concave, as to maybe hold the chain in that area. When installed, it looks like this, and the brass can spin freely. Now remember, this is the slack side of it. The other side is the tension. So there's no tension on this either. It's just kind of taking up the play and keeping that chain from slapping around a lot. Now I think this would have worked, but then I thought to myself, this could lead to catastrophic failure, especially since it's brass on a steel chain, and that's all I had kicking around. But that was the general idea I came up with, and I think it would hold. You might be thinking about those 80% completed threads in there, and that wouldn't be a problem because this bolt actually would be basically almost touching the cover. So even if it was to try to back out or go wonky, the cover would support the back of it. And if you want to get crazy, you could actually put a glob of epoxy in the stator cover, and when you put it on, that epoxy would surround this entire bolt and give it super structural stability. But then when you take the cover off, it would just leave like a casting there. So maybe put oil on this so the epoxy doesn't stick to the bolt. Anyway, that's the idea. I just wanted to show you guys kind of what I came up with. I decided not to go with it though. So now let me show you how to install the new chain, and we'll see how much less slack is in the new one. Another reason I decided to try and put a tensioner on it is because I know the new chain is going to just get slop and slack in it again. So really, this is probably just normal. It makes me nervous. And since I did some research and read about guys having these chains break, it's not that common, but it has happened. I decided a $13 chain, I'm going to put it in. But better yet, a chain that's already stretched out, why not just put a tensioner on it? Because this chain's never going to break from load, in my opinion. It's only driving an oil pump and a water pump. However, it will break if it jumps off, or if it binds and jumps a tooth, or any of the above. So to replace it, your first step is threading the 35mm puller onto the flywheel. And then I held it with this large crescent wrench and actually used the open end of the 17mm to crank this screw clockwise. It gave one big pop, so I assume it's going to be taper. This puller was a very tight fit in between the gas tank too. So let me just pull this whole thing off, and yep, it's a taper fit. You got this too, so make sure you don't get any dirt up in those rollers, and don't lose your keyway. Not keyway. And then this large gear slides right off of there too. That one is not keyed or anything, but it does have a thrust washer on the back of it, so don't lose that. This is the balance shaft, and I'm now going to rotate the engine so that the crank gear lines up with the balancer gear, this little punch mark, and also so I get better access to fold over the lock washer. I then used my 1/2-inch impact gun, a long extension swivel that's not rated for impact since I can't find mine, and a 32mm socket. Made sure that those notches, punches are lined up on the gear. Not that, I mean, you could always line them up later, but I just like to take things apart that way. And with the nut and lock washer removed, you now come down below here, and you got to remove this retaining ring off the oil pump shaft. With that retaining ring off, you should be able to slide the entire guy off as an assembly, and don't lose your keyway, that goes inside of the keyway right there. But with that thought aside, it's time to throw it back together. Assembly is pretty much reverse of removal, so let me get going on it, and I'll see if there's any tips I can give you putting it together. Not super precise, but between two extensions, you can see this old chain does have more slop in it. With the new chain on there, we can see it has a lot less play. It does still have play, but I measured it to be around 5/16 of an inch. And before I had almost an inch, just using this vernier caliper. You can also see there's no way it would be contacting this case anymore where it started chewing through. And I tried putting my tensioner roller in there, and there's no way I'd ever be able to get that in there. So looks pretty good, but how long will it stay like that? Who knows? With the punches lined up, slip your key back in, and then this washer also has a keyed tang to it. So you got to make sure that goes on good. And then as per the manual, it said use some molybdenum grease on the threads and the nut and torque that down to 100 foot-pounds. It also specified to just put an aluminum plate in between these gears when you're torquing it. And apparently that's an acceptable method. So the aluminum shouldn't damage those gears. I used a plate of copper in between the gears. And after it's at 100 foot-pounds, make sure to bend one of these tabs over. And don't forget to install your retaining ring down below. And we can put our starter clutch and flywheel back on. And that's all back together. Just make sure you have your thrust washer behind this gear and that the key's in place. And if you need any other assembly tips, consider checking out that other video, since I'm going to chime back to that one and finish the stator installation video. The last note I'll say is that I think I'm definitely going to add a low oil pressure light on this, or a buzzer, because it's a very necessary item, especially when you drive the oil pump and the water pump by a skimpy little chain. I don't think it's a great design. You can see even with the brand new chain on there, of course, you know, these sprockets have some wear to them, but even with the brand new chain, it still has slop. And I have rated failures of these. So in my opinion, they could have done a little bit better of a job with this, but then again, a lot of engines have oil pump chains like this. I've just never seen one that sloppy. So I'm happy I replaced it. Probably could have left it, and I'm sure it would have been all right, but I'm glad I did. So consider dropping this one thumbs up. Let me know your experience or thoughts down below. Have you ever seen one break? Are you going to replace yours? And any feedback's hugely appreciated. If I forgot to mention anything in this, I always plug that in the description down below, so consider checking out that or any links I have, and hopefully I see you in another video. No nonsense, no how. Over out.